his passion was the gospel and people. Recognizing, like what you just said, that you think nothing of what he did will burn. And I just think before the Lord, he recognized that the only thing you can take with you is people, you know? And so his investment was, how many can I take with me?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time you listen to us, we are just so thankful that you do. My name is Chris Von Holt. I am the discipleship pastor here at Cedar Crest, and I am not joined on the podcast per se by my wonderful co-host Lauren Skinker. However, he is manning and working the cameras, and so we are so thankful for his work in that. So he's a part of this podcast, though he is unseen. Today, we are doing a special episode. We are attempting to honor the life and legacy of Glenn Felty, who was a pastor here at Cedar Crest for well over a decade, and after he retired, continued to serve in various capacities, most recently as a lay elder here at our church. I am joined by several guests today to my right, and we're going to have them each introduce themselves to you and tell them how they're related to Glenn, and each one of them is going to help tell the story about Glenn's life and legacy.
My name is Sherry Felty. I am Glenn's daughter, the youngest of 3 children, and maybe the one who knows him best as father.
I'm Shirley Felty. Glenn and I were married for almost 59 years before the Lord took him home, and it's been my joy and privilege to be his wife.
And I'm Ron Erb, and I served with Glenn for just about a decade on staff here at Cedar Crest Bible Fellowship Church.
I'm John LaRusso, the retired former outreach pastor who Glenn brought into the fold, so to speak. I met Glenn many years ago when he first came on staff.
I'm Dave Schloneker. I was a co-worker of Glenn's in Venezuela with the Evangelical Alliance Mission. We worked together in Rubio, Venezuela for 2 years only before they had to go home. But we have been friends for the last 50 years over the time that I've known Glenn and Shirley.
So you were, I'm sure, thrilled when he decided to take the position here at Cedar Crest.
That was absolutely wonderful. It did.
Well, to kind of kick things off, I would like you to do your absolute best to describe Glenn with either one word, bonus points for that, or one phrase. So whoever wants to be brave and jump out there and get that going, go for it.
I'd say he was
Go.
He was a team builder and an encourager. I had many opportunities to sit with Glenn and receive a performance review, and I was always harder on myself than he was ever on me, and he always ended our sessions not only with prayer, but he also said, "Well, Ron, I'm glad we're on the same team."
Yeah, I would add to that and just say that for my one word, I would say Glenn was loyal, confident in who he was in Christ. That loyalty came through in all those kinds of situations, you know. So.
Glenn was truly a man of God. Every time I was associating with him, he was always about the gospel, always about the Lord, and always about sharing that with other people. So I would classify him as a true servant and man of God.
And I'd add on to that. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think a word that comes to me is mentor. And that can carry a whole lot of, I mean, it covers a lot of different areas, and it covers what Dave just mentioned. It covers discipleship, and those are all things that play into that. But even as a father, I would say he filled that role as a mentor and as one who was raising up the next generation to serve the Lord, to love the Lord as much as he loved the Lord or more. So I would say mentor for me is a word that really described him.
I agree with all of these comments about Glenn. And I would say also that Glenn was genuine. He practiced what he preached. And also, he loved me as Christ loved the church.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. One word that came into my mind as you all were talking was indiscriminate. And what I just mean by that is it did not matter your ethnicity, your age, your status. Glenn was willing to pour into you. Just what blew me away was the way he passionately taught and joyfully taught young middle schoolers in the same way that he taught adults. It was no different to him. As a matter of fact, he probably saw young people as more important, and I put quotes around that just because he saw them as the next generation, that if he could capture them for the Lord, that they would have a great impact. Yeah. Is there a particular moment or saying, something that stands out to you from his life that really kind of encapsulates him or defines him?
Could I just say something about that? From the time I first met Glenn, I knew he had a servant's heart, and he cared more for others than for himself. He was just so kind, and we were on a Christian service assignment the first time, and I wasn't feeling well, and I mean, he helped me get on the bus, and he was that way with everybody. He never thought of himself. It was always others.
I would say one of the things that stands out to me about Glenn is he would look at someone, and he did this to me. He'd look at you and evaluate you in the light of what you could become, not of what you were at the moment. He saw potential in people, and he invested and followed through with it.
Do you remember the first time you met Glenn and felt like he was interacting with you in that way?
Well, I would say the first time that I really felt that in a very overwhelming way was he approached Nancy and I and asked us if we would become the Unreached People Group's champions of Cedar Crest.
Gee, I wonder how much he had to pull teeth for that.
Well, at that time, I certainly didn't feel qualified. But like I said, he saw something deeper than even I saw in myself. And, I appreciate that very much because he's willing to invest in and see you step into those shoes and become that. So, yeah.
I will jump onto that. I think that's true. And I think that was always reflected consistently, like even when he was in Venezuela as the principal or the director of the school there, testimonies from students that now, years down the road, that are now in ministry, but I think that same thing where he saw in them the potential. And I think it's the same thing with the youth, like that he was willing to teach middle schoolers at his age, right? Was because he saw, God gave him that ability to see that there was that potential in each one, and to encourage that and to try to spark it in the person. So I could, go back to emails and chats that I've received since my dad passed away of just over and over that kind of same thing. Your father, just challenged me or what have you. And there are people serving around the world to this day that, not just because of my father, but I think clearly God used him to plant that seed and to see the potential in their lives.
Which demonstrates, I think, his trust in the Lord, because the only reason why you think someone has potential is because of what you think God will do in their life. Yeah. Anyone else have something they want to throw out there before we...
He certainly did the same thing for me. When I arrived with my wife in Rubio in 1977, Glenn immediately started to build into my life, and I appreciated the fact that he encouraged me to expand in my abilities and my talents and to become an active participant there at Christensen Academy, where I stayed for another 27 years. So I attribute that to Glenn and his encouragement.
Well, and could I say something there too? Just because I've heard Glenn mention Dave so many times that he never had another staff member under him who would come to him and ask if there was any more he could do. Dave would offer, and he was busy already.
What was I thinking? Because Glenn always had something else I could do.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you wish for.
Right.
So this is probably going to be directed primarily at Shirley and Sherry, but can you describe Glenn's early years? Just give our audience a brief biography of where he's from and how he was raised and his aspirations and his religious background, things like that.
Glenn was born in Cleona near Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Annville in his later years. His family went to a EC church, Evangelical Congregational Church. It was not really a gospel preaching church, but his father taught Sunday school and was actually eventually kicked out because he was using too much Bible in Sunday school.
If you can believe that.
That sounds like a Felty trait.
But Glenn grew up playing baseball, and he was a left-handed pitcher. And his claim to fame was that he played in the Connie Mack Stadium one time, and that was always something he bragged about. And
bragged about. He doesn't brag about a whole lot. Actually, my dad never really talked about himself, but it's something we could have bragged about.
I will say that was the one thing, I believe it was at his funeral, I heard that. And I'm sure when I came on staff to some level, I heard he'd played baseball, but I didn't remember that about him at all. I knew he was a big tennis player and a big bass fisherman. Yeah. But I had no clue, and I knew he was athletic, but I had no clue he had played baseball to that extent, and I was so disappointed that him and I didn't actually have more baseball conversations.
He never really got to play ball with the Cedar Crest team, I don't think, but tennis wasn't a big thing for him until he was at Columbia Bible College, CIU right now, and he got to play with one of the profs, and so tennis became big for him then. He was junior and senior class president in high school, and it was in his junior year that he went to hear a speaker. It was two brothers, and they preached and sang and did chalk art work and everything. And Glenn came to know the Lord that night. So he was 16 years old when he got saved. And one day his father said, "Glenn, what are you going to do after you graduate?" Because he had finished his junior year. "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And Glenn, out of the blue, said, "Well, I think I want to go into missions, be a missionary." He didn't know any missionaries. He never, they didn't have missionaries in his church. And his father happened to have a magazine, which was put out by Team. For some reason, he got this magazine, and Glenn must have maybe been influenced by that. But he always thought his dad wanted him to become a famous baseball player. And his dad said to him, "Son," he said, "I am so thankful." He said, "I've been praying for years that God would take one of my children and use him in the ministry." Wow. Amen. He never said anything to Glenn. Glenn had no idea, but that was the beginning.
Wow. So with that then, tell us, what did he do from there? So once you graduated high school, went to Bible college, and
well, he was, everybody thought he was going to Lebanon College. Lebanon College.
Yeah, Lebanon.
Yeah. Oh, Lebanon. But I forget what happened. They kind of disowned him when they found out he wanted to go to Moody Bible Institute instead. I guess he was going to get a scholarship or something, and so he applied to Moody. Meanwhile, I had applied to Moody, but we didn't know each other. So we met at Moody Bridal Institute.
Oh, yeah.
And from then on.
So that's a running joke, I would imagine. Yes. Yeah. As I think when I was in college, they said that a lot of the young ladies, at least, went for their MRS degree. Yeah, right.
So it was while we were at Moody, our first year, actually, we met each other because we had a practical Christian work assignment, and it was with CEF. And that's when the time I was like sick and we're going home, getting on the bus, and he sort of helped me. And I just was really impressed with him. But we really didn't get to know each other until before our senior year. We both ended up going on a missions trip to Mexico. We were on a team together. Glenn was the preacher, I was the musician, and another girl was the chalk artist. We drove all the way from Texas to the southernmost tip of Mexico that summer, 6 weeks, and it was amazing. So that's how we got to know each other, and we became a couple. We came back to Moody, and so our senior year, we had dated and stuff.
So you both then, over time, applied to team, right? And we're applying to go unknown, or did you know to Venezuela?
We actually, during our senior year at Moody, we were involved in missions prayer teams and prayer meetings, and they would send representatives from different missions. So we got familiar with team at that time, and both really, apart from each other, were heading, first of all, we wanted to go to a country where they spoke Spanish, and then apart from each other, we ended up wanting to go to Venezuela. And so that's how the Lord led us that way. But then we graduated Moody, and our ways parted for a while. He went to CIU, and then missionary internship, which was a program to give him more practice. And
I'll interject there, Mom. I think that missionary internship, I think from what Dad has said, was really a huge impact on him. Mm-hmm. That was up in Michigan.
Yes.
There's a couple that just until they passed away a couple years ago were part of that group that took him into that church and had him involved in doing ministry at that church, and that was really fundamental and foundational. I think too that was part of maybe of his idea of mentoring and discipling and whatever came out of his experience, because I just remember him talking about that experience as really an impacting, very impactful. So
made a great impact on his life. So it was during that time when he was in Michigan, he contacted me about, did I want to come and see him graduate from this program?
He asked you out on a date.
Yeah. So yeah. And then so I did, and we sort of started, talking again, and we got back together then. And when Team had their annual conference in May of 2003, he asked if I wanted to go out with him. I was in New Jersey. No, it's
I said, wait a second.
1960. I should be looking at
1963.
1966.
Okay.
So we actually drove out together, and it was on the last night that he said, "You want to go for a ride?" Mm-hmm. So we went for a little ride. Nice lake. He proposed to me.
Whoa.
May 16. 1966.
Yeah, just not the one you're thinking of. He was fishing.
So my sister, who was she just passed away in Alaska, but my sister was 2 years younger than me. She got married in April of 1966, and we got married in August of 1966. And then we left for Costa Rica the day after Christmas that same year, and we're in language study.
Wow.
They called us out to come to them.
Yeah, so you were baptized by fire with it. Wow, that is incredible.
And that was language school at that time, was going to Costa Rica prior to going to Venezuela or other Latin, South American countries.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, from what I've heard, it takes immersion to really learn a language. So you were speaking earlier about influences. Maybe all of you can speak to what you saw, maybe as a friend or as a co-laborer, his biggest influences throughout his life. Authors he enjoyed reading, pastors he admired, and not just speaking of the celebrity pastors that we think of. It could be somebody else that he admired, but just people you knew he was always listening to or reading?
Well, I'll jump on that real quick off of what you shared, because of course they went to Moody, and D.L. Moody was, I think, had a huge impact, and also the other professors that he had while he was at Moody. But just now, as I've been going through his things, I found on his desk, and I'll read the quote, but talking about something that he has all before him. He has it's on a note stuck on his laptop, and it's a quote from D.L. Moody. It says, "If you come to the cross every morning, you will never get but one day's journey from the cross." And so it just stood out to me as, you know, he started at Moody, and Moody has just been an influence among others. But I think that he took a lot from what Moody had taught.
And then at CIU, his favorite prof was Mr. Hatch, who became Dr. Hatch, but his Progress of Redemption course and Minor Prophets was something that Glenn often referred back to, that was so foundational.
And what does that acronym stand for, the school?
Columbia International University.
Yeah, now.
It
back
used
then
to
it
be
was
Columbia Bible College.
Yeah, when they've
Great. I know at Cedar Crest, he very much appreciated the Answers in Genesis ministry and depended upon them and their curriculum in what he saw as the battleground of the foundation of the Bible, the first, in particular, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, and that was a passion of his here at Cedar Crest. Actually, I think I said to both of you when we met to go over some of his services, I said, it was the first summer that he's not gonna reach out to me and say, hey, which trimester? He didn't ask if. It was which trimester am I teaching this? And of course, at that point, I had already told him I think this is a great regular course. And talk about mentoring, I went up to it right in front of his body was here at the church for the viewing, in view of Glenn. And for you guys, I went to Dave Kohler, and I said, Glenn, just so you know, Dave, when are you going to pick somebody and mentor them and teach this class? Because he took Dave Kohler under his wing and mentored Dave in that. So that very much speaks to him in that regard.
Whenever I would get together with Glenn over the last 20 years, we would go to Perkins. One time it would be at my Perkins on Lehigh Street, and the next time it would be at his Perkins on Cedar Crest Boulevard. But he would always have read something or seen a podcast, and he would be reflecting on what some Moeller, for example. He was always into Moeller. He listened to a podcast by him every day. And so he would always be sharing nuggets of truth that he found from those. But as far as his influence, he influenced so many, many people in Venezuela. That's what I can speak to most, perhaps, is that what I was impressed with, of course, was the fact that Glenn and Shirley went to language school in Costa Rica. And before they completed it, team asked them to go to Rubio, Venezuela to teach at a missionary kids school. And they packed up immediately, Shirley and little Glennie at 5 months old, and packed up and moved to Rubio, Venezuela, and began a career there as missionary school teachers.
And we were planning to do church planting.
Exactly.
We had no idea.
So, I mean, Glenn was prepared to be a pastor and a church planter somewhere. And so there he ends up in Rubio, Venezuela. And his influence there was enormous, from the physical plant that developed under his directorship. He arrived there in, 67? In 67. And within 10 years, when he arrived there, the school was meeting in a broken-down building behind the church that they were afraid would fall down when too many kids were in it. And the dorms were old buildings also. Within a couple years, Glenn had orchestrated the building of a brand new school building, which was a beautiful building and very functional for Rubio, and very good testimony for our town of Rubio of what God was doing in that community. And And he had also orchestrated the building of a 2-story girls' dorm, which had a dorm and dining hall and laundry facility and everything else. But the greater impact there was that he insisted that our students at Christensen Academy had to be engaged with our Venezuelan community. I've been at a lot of missionary kids' schools since then, and that was unique, I think, the way he encouraged all of our kids and all of our staff to be involved in our community, whether it's in sports or going to churches or being out there doing Bible clubs in the barrios outside of town. That was all Glenn's passion. And like I said, I was only there for 2 years with him, but he implanted so much stuff at the school which continued. And I have an up-to-date testimony because a family from Rubio moved to Emmaus 5 years ago. And Jackson and Teresa said, this is 25 years after the school closed, they said the impact of Christensen Academy on our town of Rubio exists even today. By the way, Glenn was involved all the time in governmental leaders with them, in church leadership, in mission leadership, and he left a legacy in Rubio long after he left, because he instilled that in our community. And I appreciated Glenn for that, because I continued on there after that, and we continued everything that he established there in Rubio.
I think not much of Glenn's work will burn up in front of Jesus. So much of it was intentional and thoughtful and missional in that sort of mindset.
And you know what? He would not want to take any credit for any of that. Glenn was so humble. I mean, you know, it was just amazing. He had not 1 ounce of pride in that.
Well, what I'm kind of picking up, both from having worked underneath him, been around him, hearing you all speak, is that Glenn was qualified to do leaps and bounds, and yet he was willing to go where God wanted him to go. I didn't realize that he had wanted a church plant and he had worked at a school. And then I know he had served as a senior pastor for 10 years, and then he came here to be an associate and then a senior associate. When every time he preached, it's like this man could have continued to be the preaching pastor somewhere else. But he came to where the Lord wanted to put him, and his impact was more than he could ever imagine. And I can't remember exactly how it goes, that quote that he always shared, but it ends with, only what's done for Christ will last.
Only one life will.
I have it
soon-
written down. C.T. Studd, and it's a poem he wrote, but the statement is, only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last.
I think he said he wanted that as his epitaph on his tombstone.
Probably.
And, yeah, because it's just, that's what drove his life.
And I think I'll piggyback on that and what Dave said too. I think the key there is his passion was the gospel and people. Recognizing, like what you just said, that you think nothing of what he did will burn. And I just think before the Lord, he recognized that the only thing you can take with you is people, you know? And so his investment was, how many can I take with me, you know? And whatever that looked like. So whether that was being a lead pastor or whether that was being the principal of a school and you felt totally unqualified or not, you know, that wasn't your calling. It just, that he recognized that was the key, was investing in people and taking the gospel to people. So while he didn't end up doing church, quote unquote, doing church planting, I can't think of how many of those students from that school who are now doing church planting around the world have been or are now. And God's church is being built around the world. And part of that is because God used him to building into their lives. So
speaking of people, I'll add an S. We'll talk about peoples, the nations. Tell me about his theology of missions and his philosophy of missions.
I don't know that I can tell you the whole story, but I can tell you his passion for bringing the gospel to those that have never heard. Unreached people groups were, in my estimation, in dealing with Glenn, that was like, as I've said before, the tip of the spear. That was Glenn's passion. Let the Nations Be Glad. It was one of his favorite books. And he followed through with that. He practically put it into place. I remember he took Cliff by the arm. Come on, we're going to the Finishing the Task conference. You know, Glenn wasn't in charge, but he was in charge.
So he influenced, whether it was from the top or from somewhere.
From the middle, somewhere behind, doesn't matter. He was going to influence. And it was after that, you know, things really kicked into high gear again here at Cedar Crest for unreached people groups. And that's his influence. That was his passion.
And it's going on and on and on and on.
It continues.
Always.
It's him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Shirley, I mean, I know there are other people, but I just remember one of the Go Conference years, I think Glenn still did it, and we introduced that him facing a task unfinished. And I think I remember you playing to that.
We worked together to come up with theme and something that could be a theme song and other music to use as well. And we always enjoyed working together like that. He used to joke about when he was pastoring in New Jersey, and I was the music director and choir director and everything. And a month before, I'd say, "What are you going to preach on such and such a date?" You know, because I'm already planning the music to fit the messages. And that was kind of a family joke.
Oh, that's, yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess both of you were big planners, because he was certainly.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
A big planner. He had the ability to see a task through, because he was able to see pieces of it. And then he was a persuasive communicator to get people to agree with what he thinks should happen. A la, you know. Yeah. Yes.
And hold the microphone. Don't let
anybody
get a hold of that microphone.
Yeah, that was a cardinal sin. If you let that microphone go, well, you lost.
So I still remember my first staff meeting in June of 2016, and Glenn had a cake made for me that said "Welcome, Chris" and everything, and presented it. But then I remember when we got to the service review, and I was just like, he said, people were talking about the service and what went well, and then he said, "Well, guys, we went a minute and a half over." And I'm from a church that there was no prescribed end time. And so I just was like, wait, what? And then I learned how precise.
And not everybody agreed with him.
Right. And Ron, you were, I think, on this trip because Ben Treisman told me about this, but I wasn't there. I guess you went to a conference or some kind of workshop in Tennessee.
Fairhaven.
And Glenn had planned every stop, including where you were going to get food.
And who was going to pay.
Along the way. So while everyone's, I guess, already, enjoying some humor, share, if you will, maybe a story or a quirk about Glenn that.
Oh, I can help you with that. So Glenn had a thing for people drinking coffee in meetings and that kind of thing. And at one annual conference, I was sitting next to him, and Cedar Crest used to at least always occupy the front section there. So Glenn was to my right, and I reached out to drink my cup of coffee that he's like, "What do you like? Why do you drink that?" And I spilled it. Did he tell you about that? See, he's on his Bible.
I don't think he ever told me that.
Oh, my word.
I don't think so.
I said, "Oh, Clint, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for your Bible." And he just, I think something under his breath, but he just blew it off and just, don't worry about it, I think I would love to have known what he was thinking and what he wanted to say. But
one of my first staff meetings with Glenn is his humor. He comes out. I sat down next to him. He's sitting next to me, and he's looking over everybody. We're getting ready to pray before we go into the service.
was on a Sunday morning.
It was Sunday morning, yeah. And I had jeans on. They were,
And a jacket.
and a jacket. I mean, you know, nice collared shirt and a jacket, but they were really nice jeans. You never knew. And they're, you know, he doesn't say a word. He looks over at me. He looks down at my pants. He reaches over and he grabs my pants and he gives a little jerk on my pants leg. He looks at me and he turns back around. Never said a word, but communicated everything he wanted me to know. So it's like it fits right in. Yeah. Oh my word. It was great. I never wore jeans again.
I bet you didn't. I bet you didn't. Dave, I'm assuming you have to have something from those 2 years in Venezuela.
I know he drove a car, a yellow Nova. A Nova, which of course means it doesn't go in Spanish.
No, Nova. Ah.
It didn't have an engine, Chris.
Oh. Yes. Yes, you're referencing my sermon. I said, wait a second. Was he the Fred Flintstone or what's going on here? Oh, that's funny. Glenn driving a yellow sporty car.
It wasn't exactly sporty.
It wasn't too sporty, but
No.
I will say this. Oh, did you have something to add on that?
No.
Okay, so I'll just add to that because I won't go into the whole story. But we used that Nova for a trip that took us across the llanos, which are the plains of Venezuela, in rainy season.
Oh my goodness.
Bad idea.
Bad, very bad.
No roads. Pure mud.
Rear wheel drive.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
I don't know, alligators or crocodile, I don't know. Alligators on sides, right? We are stuck. And there's these Jeeps coming by, and they're looking at us like, you are
Only
loonies.
two.
What are you crazy? But anyway,
Crazy gringos.
a long story short, we got out of there. But when we got out of there, that Nova, which really literally did not go at that point, we got out of there. I think a Jeep had to pull us through. But anyway, and we were just young kids, 3 of us in the back seat. You know, we're seeing these wild animals and critters, and we get to the gas station and open up the hood, and it is caked, literally caked with mud,
Dried,
baked in.
The sun.
So it was at that point a Nova. But
Yes,
that's
it
an
was.
example of.
Goodness.
I mean,
it was adventurous.
well, I mean, we were actually going to meet, I think, with some missionary friends, and it was. But that's one of the things when I was thinking through like events or things that I remember for my father, and I just say, well, we had a lot of adventures. I mean, like, good ones. I mean, they weren't bad, but I think that was one of the things we definitely had a lot of adventures.
Yep.
So I don't think anything or much of anything of what's been said would surprise any listener who knew Glenn. But can you think of anything, whether it be another story or a interest of his or a hobby or passion of his that was not known necessarily to everybody that he came into contact with? Something that might surprise, like if Glenn were to play 2 truths and a lie, what would be one of the 2 truths that he would use to try to deceive you into thinking that maybe he did not do that, but he did?
That's a hard one, because I think he was very much what you see is what you get.
Yeah,
You know,
true.
I think
He was an open
didn't.
book.
You didn't have things that you didn't know about that I can think of. Like, I can't even think, probably people wouldn't think of my dad as being a game player per se, but we did play, like family games or whatever, like Password. And the funny thing, like now as we became adults and moved out of the home or whatever, and then we would have family get-togethers, and my dad would be like, oh, let's take Password along. And we're all like, oh, Password. And it wasn't because we had bad experiences with that, but just, I think we had gotten to a point or, just not interested in it. But I think there were things like that we did play games and such as, when we were growing up, that probably most people wouldn't see my dad as a game player per se, of that kind.
And he would, from the time we had little Glencito, Glenn every night would read a Bible story. We'd have devotions together as a family. From the time Glenn, he couldn't even, all he says, Adam and Eve. Adam, Eve, big lizard. Just like from way back. And all through, you know, I don't know at what point the kids went to college or what, we had family devotions in the evening. I often say our kids were born like a year apart. We had 3, 13 months apart and 15 months apart. So all 3 were in cloth diapers at the same time.
We were saints. So and anyway,
during rainy season, during rainy season, it was a challenge. But I just often say that Glenn changed as many diapers as I did. He would come home, like if he had a break in the morning or afternoons at school, he'd race home, help me with whatever, and the kids, go back, lunchtime, come home, have a quick lunch, go back. You know, he was always hands-on, and I mean, he didn't neglect he was teaching right from the start. He had 7 subjects. And we had little 5-month-old Glennie in one little room where we lived for the first month or so. And he had a study the night before on these 7 subjects that he had never taught. The reason he was asked to come teach at Christensen Academy was that he had substitute taught when he was in missionary internship a few classes in the school in the town. And so somebody heard about this and said, oh, well, Glenn Felty can come teach at CA.
He's qualified.
Yeah, that's how he started out. And then he became principal, too. So, yeah.
Right, yeah, he was good, too.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me is how he rose to the occasion and was a very hard worker. Well, maybe leave our listeners with just one maybe piece of Glenn's legacy that you'd want them to remember him for. And obviously as believers, right, for us, death is not the final sting. It loses its sting, and we will see Glenn again for all eternity. And so this isn't goodbye, but for this life, what would you want for his legacy to remain and stick to those listening to this podcast?
I think Glenn was a leader in many, many, many ways. And like we said before, he could lead from the front, but he didn't necessarily need that. He could lead from the middle, he could lead from the back, but he was always a leader. And the impression I always got from him is, follow me as I follow Christ. And he did follow Christ.
Just related to that, I was going to say that we had a number of ministry changes in our lifetime. We hadn't planned for any of them. And we had not planned to leave Venezuela, and God didn't give us the choice because of my serious illness. And then we didn't plan to leave the church in Clifton, but the mission asked us to come out so he could be on the staff. We didn't plan to leave the mission, and then the day after April Fool's Day, Glenn came and said to me, where do you want to move? Well, they downsized, and he didn't have a job anymore, and we ended up here. Every time God moved us, it was the better than we could have ever chosen. And I just want to read a chorus of a song that we had sung at our wedding. Now, you'll laugh at the title for a wedding song.
The fight is on.
Submission.
Yeah.
It was called Submission. And this was a song we came to know at Moody. And the chorus says, not what I wish to be, nor where I wish to go. For who am I that I should choose my way? The Lord will choose for me. 'Tis better far, I know. So let him bid me go or stay. There's no time to read the whole thing, but that was the story of our lives, that God was in control, and it was better. We came here to Cedar Crest, and it just was, God's way is perfect. The verse that Glenn had inscribed in my wedding band, as for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a shield to those that trust in him. 2 Samuel 22:31.
Praise God.
I'll just add, I wrote to my brother this morning. I'm like, I just should have asked you, a few days ago. But anyway, is there one word that stands out to you when you think of Dad? I didn't hear from my middle brother, but my oldest brother wrote back right away and said steadfast. That was the word that stood out and stands out. For me personally, integrity, man of integrity. And then just that thought of the legacy, I think, we've already talked about it. The legacy of the people that continue to carry on with a passion for the Lord, with the passion for the lost, with the passion for the unreached, for young people, for old people. So I think that legacy is that he is here. It's here. It's represented I guess we're all older right now, so maybe it's with the next, the middle schoolers and so forth. But I think that's his legacy, is that it carries on with that next generation. The men of this church that he has been mentoring and training for leadership. He was discipling a man who came to the Lord just shortly before he passed away. He was witnessing to whoever he could at the hospital until the last 2 days when he wasn't able to. So his legacy would be that he continued to be passionate for the gospel, for the word, for the Lord, and for those around him until the end.
Matthew 25, the talents, he took let's say God gave him 50 talents, because it sounds like he had more than the average person, and he made 50 more. He was faithful with what he was given.
Yep. Sure. I think, I don't know how many people will realize this, that Glenn was instrumental in bringing worship-based prayer to not only Cedar Crest Church, but as we as a church began to change the way we had prayer meetings. I think he came to one too many prayer meetings on Wednesday nights here and said, this got to change. And I'll never forget, I had only been on staff for a week, and we took the staff retreat down to Fairhaven. And I remember being impressed that on the way home, even though he wasn't ignoring anybody, he had something to play, CDs or something, and earphones, and he was listening to something, and here it was Daniel Henderson, and it was the teaching on worship-based prayer. And he came back, and, with his ability to think through tasks, parts, and communicate persuasively, it went from him to pastoral staff, to the elders, and then the other leaders in the church. And eventually we started having worship-based prayer meetings.
I had no clue I thought that was more of a Cliff thing. I didn't know that was driven by Glenn.
It started with him.
Wow.
Yep.
How about it?
Lead from the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time. We could go on for hours, for days, for weeks. We'll have eternity to chat about how the Lord's worked in all of our lives, because obviously, as Glenn would want, God receives all the glory for how Glenn lived his life faithfully, and all the different fruit and things and the crowns that Glenn will receive and we will receive. We cast them right back at his feet. And so we're grateful for that. And we just want to thank you for listening to this episode, this special episode of Captivate and Conform, about the life and legacy of our beloved pastor, husband, father, and friend and mentor, Glenn Felty. And if you have any questions or comments or memories about Glenn, feel free to share those with us at podcast@cedarcrest.church. Until next time, we trust that you will continue to be captivated by and conformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ.